You would think that the deeper you love, the more he would stay. But when a woman becomes too deep, too self-aware, too illuminated by her own truth, something happens. He begins to lose his ground. Most men can love only in shallow waters, where reflection is gentle and easy to digest. Yet when she invites him into the ocean of her soul, where silence holds meaning and eyes speak of eternity, he trembles. Because in her depth, he sees himself, and what he sees terrifies him. Depth demands presence. It asks for a man who has met his own shadows, who can stand in the darkness without fleeing. But the modern man, raised on distraction and validation, rarely knows the language of the unconscious. He may crave her intensity, her mystery, her empathy, but only in fragments, never in full truth. He mistakes her emotional depth for drama, her vulnerability for neediness, her silence for withdrawal. He does not understand that she is not trying to consume him, she is simply mirroring his unhealed parts back to him. And when he sees his reflection in her, distorted, raw, and unfiltered, he runs. Not because she is too much, but because she shows him too much of himself. She awakens the shadows he has buried beneath ambition, pride, and avoidance. In her gaze, he senses the echo of his mother's disappointment, the ache of his father's absence, the suppressed hunger for intimacy he never learned to hold. Her emotional gravity pulls him toward the truth of who he is, and for a man who has built his identity upon denial, that truth is unbearable. He will tell himself she is too emotional, too complicated, too intense. These are easier words than saying, "I am not yet brave enough to meet myself." For a woman rooted in depth, this becomes her quiet sorrow, not that she was unworthy of love, but that her love required courage he did not yet possess. She was not too deep, he was too shallow for the waters she lived in. In Jungian terms, she represents his anima, the feminine archetype that stirs his unconscious. Her presence is not random, it is archetypal. She is the mirror sent by life to awaken his sleeping soul. But to embrace her is to face the disowned emotions within: grief, fear, longing, vulnerability. Most men, uninitiated into their inner world, interpret this confrontation as threat rather than initiation. They flee to lighter connections, where nothing asks for transformation, only entertainment. And so, the woman of depth becomes the sacred test in a man's journey of individuation. She is the invitation to evolve, but not every man accepts it. Many will retreat to the comfort of surface waters, convincing themselves that peace is found in simplicity, when in truth it is found only in wholeness. Yet the irony remains, the very woman he leaves behind is the one who could have led him to his truest self. For the woman, the pain of being too deep cuts differently. She begins to wonder if her intensity is a flaw, if her emotional insight is a curse. She hides parts of herself to seem easier, more digestible, less threatening. But the soul cannot breathe in pretense. The more she silences her essence, the more her spirit withers. She forgets that her depth is not an error, it is her nature, her calling. To feel deeply is not weakness, it is wisdom wrapped in sensitivity. You see, a woman who has met her own shadows cannot return to small talk disguised as connection. She has danced with her pain, she has met her own loneliness in the silence of the night, and she has found meaning within it. Such a woman no longer seeks validation through how much she is wanted, she seeks resonance through how much she is seen. Yet few can truly see her, because to see her is to confront one's own unseen. Still, her role in the collective story is vital. She is the bridge between the unconscious and the conscious, between the divine feminine and the wounded masculine. Through her presence, men are reminded of what they have forgotten: the softness within strength, the beauty within surrender, the power within vulnerability. But when a man refuses that lesson, the universe withdraws her from his path. Her absence becomes his greatest teacher. So when he leaves, it is not rejection, it is revelation. The universe protects her from the smallness of his fear, from the limitation of his unawakened love. She is meant for a connection that does not shrink from her depth, but mirrors it with equal gravity. And until such a soul arrives, she learns the sacred art of solitude, of being whole within herself. Because the woman who embraces her own depth becomes untouchable by those who fear it. Over time, she learns that his departure was never truly about her, it was about the reflection she represented. For when a man stands before a woman of depth, he is not standing before her alone, he is standing before the unconscious itself. The feminine, in its purest archetypal form, is the mirror of life's mysteries, ever-changing, unpredictable, infinite. It is within her that creation and destruction coexist, and that very coexistence terrifies the man who has not yet faced the chaos within himself. To the uninitiated, the feminine appears as danger. Her silence feels like judgment, her wisdom like manipulation, her intuition like invasion. But to the man who has begun his shadow work, she becomes revelation, a living symbol of what he has been missing. Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The woman of depth embodies that unconscious. Her love does not simply comfort, it transforms. Yet transformation demands the death of illusion, and few are ready to die before they are reborn. So he resists. He distances himself from the weight of her knowing, seeking instead the illusion of ease. But ease is not intimacy, it is avoidance disguised as peace. She, on the other hand, begins to see through the veil. She understands that love without awareness is not love, it is attachment. And attachment without growth is merely repetition of pain. There is a sacred melancholy in this realization. For she recognizes that what she offered was not too much, it was merely too real. The world teaches women to dim their light to be loved, to soften their truth so it can be tolerated. Yet every time she tries, she feels the soul's rebellion rising from within. Something in her refuses to be watered down. Her spirit was not designed for comfort, it was designed for consciousness. And so, her journey turns inward. The pain of loss becomes the teacher of strength. The silence that follows his absence becomes the altar upon which she meets herself. The love she once directed outward begins to flow back into her being, not as bitterness, but as awakening. She begins to realize that the depth she once offered others is the same depth she owes herself. It is here that individuation begins, the sacred Jungian process of becoming whole. No longer defined by his validation or absence, she meets her own shadow, the parts she once disowned in the name of love. She confronts her fear of abandonment, her longing for belonging, her ache to be understood. She realizes that she was never asking him to stay, she was asking herself to stop leaving. Every time she compromised her truth for connection, she abandoned the woman within. Now, she calls her back home. This inner reconciliation is not soft or romantic, it is fierce, primal, and liberating. It is the process of burning illusions until only essence remains. Like the alchemical fire that purifies gold, her solitude becomes the crucible of rebirth. She begins to see that the wound of too much was never hers to carry, it was the world's discomfort with authenticity. Gradually, she stops asking, "Why couldn't he stay?" and begins to ask, "Why did I keep waiting?" The shift is seismic. Her focus moves from what she lost to what she has discovered, the power of presence, the beauty of boundaries, the sacredness of self-respect. She learns that true love cannot exist without equality of consciousness. Anything less is dependency wearing the mask of devotion. The next time she looks into a man's eyes, she no longer seeks reflection, she seeks recognition. There is a difference. Reflection can be distorted by projection, but recognition is born of awareness. And only a man who has faced his own shadows can truly recognize the light within her. Until then, she walks alone, but not lonely. Because solitude, in its highest form, is the meeting point between the soul and eternity. She is learning what the Stoics and mystics have always known, that peace does not come from possession, but from alignment. That freedom is not found in being chosen, but in choosing oneself. And that sometimes, loss is not punishment, it is protection. Her love remains vast, but now it has edges. Her empathy still flows, but it no longer leaks. Her presence remains nurturing, but it no longer saves. She has become the embodiment of divine containment, the woman who holds everything within, yet is ruled by nothing without. There comes a moment when the woman of depth stops searching for meaning in his absence and begins to see the spiritual architecture of the entire experience. What once felt like heartbreak begins to reveal itself as initiation. For every woman who has ever been too much for a man has unknowingly walked the ancient path of descent, the same archetypal journey that Inanna, Persephone, and countless others have walked before her. The descent into the underworld is not punishment, it is purification. It is where illusions are stripped away, where love becomes truth, and where she meets the full spectrum of her own being. When a man leaves a woman of depth, he triggers her descent. At first, it feels like loss. Her body remembers his warmth, her mind replays his words, her heart aches with the absence of what could have been. But beneath the grief lies something sacred, a doorway into the unconscious. The pain that once felt unbearable becomes the key to self-awareness. The emotions she tried to silence become her greatest teachers. This is the paradox of transformation. What wounds her also awakens her. In the stillness that follows, she begins to understand that every relationship is a mirror. He was not the answer, he was the revelation. Through him, she saw what she longed for and what she feared. She saw the parts of herself she disowned, the one who gives too much, who waits too long, who loves beyond reason. She sees now that these patterns were not born from love, but from the shadow of love, the need to be needed, the hunger to be seen. The feminine shadow, often unspoken yet deeply felt, is the addiction to emotional rescue, the belief that her worth is measured by how much she can heal another. It is the impulse to pour until she is empty, to nurture even when it costs her sanity. In Jungian terms, this is the shadow of the mother archetype, love distorted by fear of abandonment. When she awakens to this truth, something powerful happens. Compassion replaces self-blame. She no longer shames herself for loving too deeply, she honors herself for surviving it. Her healing does not come from closing her heart, but from refining its boundaries. She learns that love without discernment is not love, it is sacrifice. Real love requires consciousness, it demands reciprocity. Anything else is an echo of old wounds trying to rewrite their story. And so she begins to rewrite hers, not as the woman who waited for him to return, but as the woman who returned to herself. The Stoics called this state ataraxia, a calm soul unshaken by external storms. She begins to embody it. Her peace no longer depends on who chooses her, because she has already chosen herself. The opinions of others, the noise of the world, the memories of what was, they no longer hold the same weight. She no longer dances between proving her worth and fearing her depth. Instead, she walks with quiet power, a woman who has met her shadow and made it her ally. In her solitude, she begins to see love differently. It is no longer a search for completion, but a reflection of wholeness. The right connection, she now knows, will not require her to shrink or explain her depth. It will meet her where she is, in the balance between softness and strength, intuition and logic, chaos and calm. Until then, she allows herself to be whole without witness. From this wholeness emerges a subtle radiance, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that commands it effortlessly. People begin to feel her differently. There is something unspoken in her energy now, something grounded and free. It is the serenity of a woman who has stopped chasing and started becoming. And yet, her transformation does not make her cold. On the contrary, it makes her profoundly compassionate. She understands now why people run from love, not because they do not want it, but because they fear being seen. She has lived that fear. She has seen how love strips away illusion and leaves one naked before truth. So she does not judge him anymore. She thanks him, silently, for being the catalyst of her awakening. Because without his departure, she would never have descended. Without descent, she would never have integrated. And without integration, she would never have remembered who she truly is. With time, her perception of love itself evolves into something almost sacred, no longer a transaction of needs, but a meeting of consciousness. She begins to see that relationships were never meant to complete her, they were meant to reveal her. Each connection, especially the painful ones, has been an initiation, a mirror reflecting another layer of her psyche. The man who left did not break her, he exposed the fractures that were already there, the places within her that still believed love must be earned, chased, or proven. Now she understands the deeper language of the universe, that loss is not cruelty, but correction. That separation is often protection. The love that could not stay was not meant to be punishment, but preparation. It was the universe's way of whispering, you cannot build forever on foundations of fear. For love, to truly exist, must be free. It must flow from wholeness, not hunger. As she integrates this wisdom, her energy changes. She no longer approaches love from lack, but from abundance. Her boundaries, once built from pain, now emerge from clarity. She is no longer afraid to walk away from half-hearted affection, for she knows that walking away from what diminishes her is not loss, it is alignment. The feminine, when conscious, does not cling, she allows. She no longer grasps at what leaves, because she has learned that what is truly hers cannot be taken. Within her stillness, she senses the quiet rhythm of the divine feminine rising, not as a romantic fantasy, but as an internal state of sovereignty. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, integrating both the light and the shadow, the lover and the warrior, the nurturer and the mystic. She no longer identifies solely with the role of giver, she has reclaimed the part of her that receives. She no longer carries the guilt of her power, the fear of her wisdom, or the shame of her depth. She becomes the full expression of her essence, no longer fragmented by expectation. From this place of wholeness, her presence becomes magnetic. Not because she seeks to attract, but because authenticity always does. Men still approach her, some drawn by her softness, others by her mystery, but she can now see through the eyes of awareness. She recognizes who has met his own shadow and who still hides from it. And though she carries no bitterness, she no longer plays savior. Her love is no longer a ladder for someone else to climb toward consciousness. It is a temple, sacred, intentional, and guarded by self-respect. And if another man someday enters that temple, he will not come to be saved, he will come as an equal. A man who has walked through his own darkness, who no longer fears the feminine as mirror, but welcomes her as muse. Their love will not be rooted in fantasy, but in truth, not in escape, but in evolution. It will not always be easy, but it will be real. Yet even if that day never comes, she is whole. Because the deepest union she has found is not with another, but with her own soul. She has integrated her masculine within, the part that protects, acts, and decides, so that her feminine can rest, create, and trust. The inner marriage has taken place, and from it, she has been reborn. In moments of solitude, she sometimes feels the echoes of his memory. But they no longer ache, they teach. She sees now that love's truest form was never about possession, it was about reflection. He was never meant to stay, he was meant to awaken something eternal within her. The lesson has been fulfilled, and so the attachment dissolves. There is an old Stoic truth that she now understands with every breath: what departs was never truly hers, and what is truly hers can never depart. This is not resignation, it is liberation. For the first time, she lives not from longing, but from presence. She is not waiting to be chosen, adored, or understood. She is already all those things within herself. Her heart, once heavy with expectation, is now vast with peace. The depth that once frightened others has become her sanctuary. The same ocean that drowned her now carries her, steady, infinite, whole. She has stopped asking why some could not stay, for she has finally stayed with herself. There is a sacred silence that follows awakening, a silence that no longer aches, but hums with quiet power. In that stillness, the woman who was once shattered begins to understand that her breaking was not destruction but expansion. What she mistook for loss was initiation into a deeper form of seeing. For only through emptiness can the soul learn fullness, only through abandonment can it learn belonging. In the beginning, she believed love was something to be earned, something that required proving, pleasing, performing. But the deeper she went, the more she realized that real love cannot be earned, it can only be mirrored. The love another offers is always a reflection of the love one gives oneself. And so, she stops reaching outward and begins to cultivate inward. Her self-respect becomes the soil, her stillness the water, her truth the sun. From that soil grows a kind of beauty that is no longer decorative, it is divine. This transformation is not loud. It happens quietly, in small moments, when she chooses to rest instead of chase, when she says no without apology, when she stops explaining her worth. It happens in the mornings when she wakes with peace instead of panic, and the nights when her solitude feels like sanctuary rather than sentence. She realizes she no longer needs to be understood to be complete, she only needs to be aligned. And alignment, she discovers, is not about perfection. It is about presence, about showing up as truth without fear of loss. This is what makes her powerful. Not because she controls, but because she surrenders consciously. The Jungian alchemists called this coniunctio oppositorum, the union of opposites within. In her, light and shadow no longer battle for dominance, they dance in sacred balance. Her softness no longer equals fragility, her strength no longer requires hardness. From the outside, she appears calm, but within, she burns with quiet purpose. She is the woman who has met herself in the ruins and rebuilt from the ashes, not as she was, but as she was meant to be. Her gaze carries both grace and gravity, her words no longer plead, they proclaim. She no longer needs to convince anyone of her depth, for her energy speaks what language cannot. And when love comes again, as it always does, she will not lose herself in its promise. She will not mistake chemistry for compatibility, intensity for intimacy, attention for affection. She has learned to read energy, not words. She will know that love is not measured by how quickly it burns, but by how deeply it roots. If it comes to add to her wholeness, she will open. If it comes to feed on it, she will walk away with grace. This is the paradox of transformation. When she no longer needs love to fill her, she becomes magnetic to it. The same depth that once scared others now draws the right ones closer, those who are no longer threatened by consciousness but nourished by it. The kind of love she attracts now will not shrink in the face of truth. It will stand in it, steady and awake. Yet whether or not that love arrives, her journey remains sacred. Because her purpose was never merely to be loved, it was to embody love. To become the living example of what it means to be whole within herself. In a world that profits from insecurity, her self-assurance becomes rebellion. In a culture that glorifies distraction, her presence becomes revolution. She becomes what Jung called the individuated soul, one who no longer seeks light outside herself, for she has become it. And when she looks back, she sees it all differently now, not as a story of rejection, but of refinement. The man who left did not take her worth, he revealed it. His absence was her initiation into sovereignty. The loneliness that once felt unbearable became the fire that forged her freedom. So she walks forward, no longer needing to be chosen, no longer waiting to be seen. Because the woman who knows her value does not chase, she chooses.